Tonight, you're going to live through the raw, unyielding saga of how Joan of Arc changed history forever, a teen's vision burning France to its soul. It's 1425, and you're in Domrémy, a muddy village under a grey sky, the air thick with the scent of damp thatch and wood smoke as a young girl's voice trembles with divine whispers you can't ignore. The Loire River whispers secrets through the reeds, and you feel the weight of an unseen presence, a call that pulls at your heart like a war drum. Armor clanks faintly in the distance, a promise of chaos, while the villagers' hushed prayers mix with the rustle of leaves. One wrong step, and you're lost to this holy madness. Let's see if you make it out alive. Before the blood starts spilling, hit like and subscribe, if you can handle what's coming. Drop a comment, where are you watching from? Now get comfortable, steel yourself, and let's begin. You're kneeling in the straw-strewn floor of a small cottage, the rough wood biting into your knees, as Joan, barely 16, stands before you, her eyes wide with a fire that defies the damp chill. Her woolen dress, patched and faded, brushes the floor, and you hear her voice, soft yet commanding, reciting names, Saint Michael, Saint Catherine, names that echo with a weight you can't grasp. The air hums with an eerie stillness, as if the saints themselves hover just beyond sight, their whispers threading through the smoke curling from a clay hearth. You smell the earthy tang of herbs drying on the sill, a contrast to the tension that grips your chest. Her hands tremble, but her gaze locks onto yours, pulling you into a vision of banners and battle cries. You rise, your boots sinking into the mud outside, the village's wooden huts leaning under a twilight fog that cloaks the fields. You see Joan, her linen cap askew, pointing toward the horizon where Rouen towers loom in your imagination, a place of destiny or doom. The wind carries the faint clang of a blacksmith's hammer, a rhythm that beats with her words, and you feel the villagers' eyes, curious, fearful, watching from shadowed doorways. An odd detail catches you, a single crow perches on a thatched roof, its black eyes fixed on Joan, as if it knows her fate. Historians still debate whether such omens shaped her resolve or were later embellishments, but you feel it stare, a chill that deepens the fog. Key fact: in 1425, Joan of Arc, a peasant girl from Domrémy, began experiencing visions she claimed were from saints, igniting a spiritual journey that would alter the 100 Years' War. You feel that spark now, your hands clenching as you follow her to the edge of the village, the muddy path slick underfoot, her footsteps sure despite her youth. You see her father, a stern figure in a russet tunic, glaring from the doorway, his disapproval a shadow you can't escape. You want to turn back, to flee the weight of her call, but her voice, steady, unyielding, draws you onward, a beacon in the gathering dusk. The crow caws once, its cry lingering, and you wonder if it heralds salvation or a pyre. You're not just a villager, you're a witness to a force that trembles the earth, Joan's faith a flame that warms yet burns. You hear the river's murmur, a constant thread, and feel the villagers' whispers, some call her blessed, others cursed, building a tension that hums in your bones. You recall the hearth's warmth, the herb scent, now distant as you stand beside her, the fog thickening, the crow's gaze unrelenting. You're not sure if her visions are divine or madness, but her certainty grips you, a chain you can't break. The blacksmith's hammer falls silent, the village holds its breath, and you follow, the mud pulling at your boots, her destiny yours to share. You move through the fog, the thatched roofs fading, Joan's silhouette a stark line against the grey. You see her hands clasp a wooden cross she carved, her fingers raw, her lips moving in silent prayer, and feel the weight of her burden, a cross you're now carrying. The crow takes flight, its wings a shadow against the twilight, and you hear its cry echo, a warning that lingers in the air. You want to ask her what she sees, to pierce the veil of her visions, but the words freeze, the cold seeping into your soul. The village's prayers rise, a faint hymn, and you march with her, the mud a mirror to the chaos ahead. You're caught in her rhythm, each step a vow, each breath a question. You notice a monk, his saffron robe fluttering, watching from a distance, his face unreadable, his rush torch casting a faint glow. You feel the villagers' fear, their eyes on Joan, their faith a fragile thread, and recall the hearth's safety, now a memory lost to her call. The crow's cry fades, the fog deepens, and you wonder if the saints are near, their whispers guiding or judging. You're not just following, you're stepping into a war, Joan's vision your shield, the village's silence your spur. Your knees buckle under the weight of steel as you don armor in Vaucouleurs' dim forge, the dawn's fire casting jagged shadows across the soot-stained walls, Joan's vision now a chain that binds you to war. It's 1429, and the clang of hammer on metal rings in your ears, the air thick with the acrid bite of heated iron and sweat, as you strap a breastplate over a coarse linen tunic, your fingers raw from the cold. Joan stands beside you, her hair cropped short under a simple wimple, her eyes blazing with a certainty that cuts through the dawn's saffron glow, her voice urging you to rise. The forge's heat sears your skin, a stark contrast to the frost outside, and you feel the armor's edge press against your ribs, a promise of battle or death. You adjust the leather straps, the creak of the gear a rhythm that syncs with your pounding heart, as soldiers, rough men in russet cloaks, gather around, their faces etched with skepticism and awe. You hear Joan's command, sharp and clear, directing a blacksmith to fit her with a helm, her small frame swallowed by the metal yet unbowed, her faith a flame that warms the frigid air. The forge's rush torches flicker, casting eerie shadows that dance on the walls, and you smell the tang of oil on the blade stacked nearby, a scent that clings to your throat. You see her hands, steady despite their youth, gripping a wooden staff, and feel the weight of her destiny pressing into your shoulders. An odd detail catches you, a single ember, glowing like a fallen star, drifts from the fire and lands on Joan's wimple, smoldering briefly before she brushes it away, her expression unshaken. Historians still debate whether such moments were divine signs or mere chance, but you feel its heat, a whisper of the pyre to come, as you tighten your gauntlets. You glance at the soldiers, their murmurs rising, some call her a saint, others a witch, and the uncertainty gnaws at you, a cold knot in your gut. You remember the whispers from Domrémy, the crow's stare, and wonder if this armor will shield you or doom you. Key fact, in 1429, Joan of Arc, at 17, convinced Robert de Baudricourt to provide her with armor and an escort, marking her transition from peasant to military leader in the 100 Years' War. You feel that shift now, your breath steaming in the dawn light as you follow her out of the forge, the steel clanking with each step, the village's mud giving way to a frozen road. You see a nobleman, his indigo cloak fluttering, watching from a wooden stool, his face a mask of calculation, and sense his doubt, a shadow that looms over your mission. You want to question her vision, to demand proof of the saints, but her stride, unhesitating, silences you, the forge's heat fading behind. You're not just a soldier, you're a piece in her divine chessboard, the armor a second skin that chafes yet empowers. You hear the soldiers' boots crunching ice, their breaths ragged, and feel their eyes on Joan, a mix of reverence and fear that mirrors your own. You recall the cottage's straw floor, the herb scent, now replaced by the forge's iron tang, and the ember's glow lingers in your mind, a portent you can't shake. The nobleman's gaze follows you, his presence a weight, and you wonder if he'll betray her, or you, before the day ends. The road stretches ahead, the dawn brightening, and you march with her, the armor's creak a hymn to her unyielding will. You grip a clay pitcher of water, your hands trembling as you pass it to a soldier, the liquid sloshing, your throat dry from the forge's heat. You see Joan adjust her helm, her wimple peeking out, her face set with a resolve that defies her youth, and feel the crew's trust shifting toward her, a fragile thread. The ember's memory burns in your thoughts, the soldier's murmurs growing louder, and you notice a monk, his verdigris robe stark against the snow, praying softly, his rush torch casting a faint halo. You want to rest, to shed the armor's weight, but her voice, calm, commanding, pulls you forward, the road a path to glory or ruin. You're caught in the march's rhythm, each step a test, each breath a prayer. You see the nobleman mount a horse, his cloak billowing, his eyes narrowing as he watches Joan, and feel the tension rise, a storm brewing in the dawn's light. You recall the forge's shadows, the embers fall, and the crow's cry from Domrémy, threads weaving a tapestry of fate. The monk's prayers fade, the soldier's boots crunch louder, and you wonder if the saints guide her, or if you're all marching to a martyr's end. You're not just armoring up, you're stepping into her war, the steel your shield, her vision your guide. Your heart pounds as you storm the walls of Orleans, the air thick with the acrid sting of smoke and blood, the siege's fury erupting around you under a noon sky bruised with ash. It's May 1429, and you're clad in dented armor, your sword slick with sweat, charging alongside Joan as arrows whistle past, their tips glinting like death's teeth. The city's stone ramparts loom, scarred and defiant, while the English cries pierce the chaos, their banners flapping in the wind like vultures circling prey. You feel the ground tremble under your boots, the weight of hope and desperation driving your legs, Joan's white standard, a lily and cross, billowing ahead, a beacon that cuts through the haze. You swing your blade, the clash of steel ringing in your ears, as Joan's voice rises above the din, urging you to hold the breach, her helm scratched but her eyes ablaze with divine fury. You see soldiers, peasants turned warriors in patched tunics, falling beside you, their gasps mingling with the thud of bodies, yet her presence pulls you forward, a force that defies the carnage. The air carries the bitter scent of burning pitch, the smoke stinging your eyes, and you hear the creak of siege ladders splintering under enemy weight. You grip your shield, its wood splintering, and feel the heat of a nearby fire, a reminder of the stakes as you push toward the gate. An eerie detail catches you, a lone raven perches on the rampart, its black wings spread as if claiming the dead, its gaze fixed on Joan with an unsettling calm. Historians still debate whether such birds were omens of victory or harbingers of her fate, but you feel its stare, a chill that cuts through the battle's heat, urging you to falter. You glance at it, its silhouette stark against the smoke, and tighten your grip, Joan's shout, onward. Snapping you back to the fray. You remember the forge's ember, the crow from Domrémy, and wonder if this raven weaves the same thread of destiny. Key fact, in May 1429, Joan of Arc led the French to a stunning victory at the Siege of Orleans, lifting the English blockade and turning the tide of the 100 Years' War. You feel that turning point now, your arms burning as you haul a wounded comrade behind a barricade, the rampart stones slick with blood and rain. You see Joan, her armor dented, thrusting her standard into the breach, her voice a clarion call that rallies the faltering line. You want to rest, to collapse under the weight of steel and fear, but her resolve, unshakable, drives you, the ravens gaze a shadow you can't escape. The gate creaks, a sliver of hope opening, and you charge with her, the smoke parting like a curtain. You're not just a soldier, you're a spark in her holy fire, the clash of steel a hymn to her vision. You hear the English retreat, their cries fading, and feel the crew's morale surge, their breaths ragged but triumphant, their eyes on Joan like a saint reborn. You recall the forge's heat, the nobleman's doubt, now distant as the rampart stones yield, and the raven's presence lingers, a question mark in the noon light. A monk, his verdigris robe torn, stumbles past, clutching a clay pitcher of water, his prayers a faint thread amid the chaos. You want to ask him for blessing, but the battle's roar drowns you, Joan's standard your only guide. You're caught in the siege's rhythm, each swing a defiance, each step a victory. You notice a peasant, his leather apron bloodied, dragging a ladder, his face etched with terror yet determination, and feel the crew's bond tighten, forged in this crucible. The raven tilts its head, its cry lost to the wind, and you remember the whispers from Vaucouleurs, the saints' names, threads weaving a tapestry of war. The gate splinters, the English falter, and you push with Joan, the smoke thinning, the noon sun breaking through. You're not sure if this victory is hers or the saints', but her voice, fierce, unyielding, holds you, the rampart your altar, her vision your shield. You heave against the gate, the wood groaning, the English arrows thinning as you breach the wall, Joan's standard high. You see her helm catch the light, her wimple peeking out, her face a mask of resolve and pain, and feel the crew's trust solidify, a chain unbroken by steel or flame. The raven takes flight, its wings a shadow against the sky, and you hear its cry echo, a farewell or a warning. You want to pause, to savor the breach, but the battle surges, the monk's prayers rising, and you march with her, the ramparts fall a step toward glory or doom. Your stomach churns as you feel the noble's cold dagger turn, their voices a venomous hiss in the torchlit hall of Chinon, the air heavy with the scent of wax and betrayal. It's July 1429, and you stand beside Joan, her armor dulled by battle, her wimple stained with the dust of Orleans, as the king's advisors, clad in indigo robes, circle like wolves, their eyes glinting with greed and suspicion. The stone walls echo with their murmurs, the flicker of rushed torches casting jagged shadows across the room, and you feel the weight of their distrust pressing against your chest, a blade poised to strike. Joan's standard leans against a wooden stool, its lily faded, and you sense her faith wavering, a crack in the armor you've come to rely on. You hear the noble's words, sharp and cutting, accusing her of witchcraft, their fingers pointing as they demand proof of her divine voices, their leather gloves creaking with each gesture. You see Charles VII, the Dauphin, seated on a throne of carved oak, his face a mask of indecision, his russet cloak pooling around him like spilled blood, and feel his hesitation, a tide that could drown her cause. The air carries the faint tang of wine from a clay pitcher on the table, a luxury that mocks your battle-worn hands, and you grip your sword hilt, the metal cold against your palm. Joan stands tall, her voice steady despite the trembling in her frame, but you notice the sweat beading on her brow, a sign of the strain you share. An eerie detail catches you, a single candle flame gutters wildly, as if an unseen breath stirs it, casting a shadow that twists Joan's face into something otherworldly, a saint or a specter. Historians still debate whether such moments hinted at supernatural presence or were tricks of the flickering light, but you feel its chill, a whisper of the pyre that haunts your thoughts. You glance at the flame, its dance unnerving, and see the nobles lean closer, their whispers growing, a conspiracy taking root. You remember the raven at Orleans, the ember in the forge, and wonder if this hall holds the same thread of fate. Key fact: in July 1429, after her victory at Orleans, Joan faced skepticism from French nobles and the Dauphin, testing her influence and marking a shift toward her eventual downfall. You feel that shift now, your boots shifting on the stone floor as you step protectively toward Joan, the nobles' eyes narrowing, their voices rising in a chorus of doubt. You see a monk, his verdigris robe faded, clutching a rosary, his face pale as he watches from the corner, and sense his fear, a mirror to your own. You want to shout, to defend her visions, but the king's silence holds you, a chain that binds your tongue, the candles flicker a warning you can't ignore. You're not just a guard, you're a shield in her crumbling trust, the noble's words a storm that threatens to break her spirit. You hear the Dauphin's sigh, a sound of resignation, and feel the crew's morale falter, their breaths shallow in the torchlight, their eyes darting between Joan and the throne. You recall the rampart's breach, the smoke of battle, now replaced by this hall's stifling air, and the candle's shadow lingers, a portent of betrayal. The monk mutters a prayer, his rush torch dimming, and you notice a noble woman, her wimple pristine, whispering to the king, her influence a subtle blade. You want to challenge her, but Joan's hand on your arm steadies you, her touch a lifeline amid the treachery. You're caught in the hall's rhythm, each accusation a wound, each silence a judgment. You see Joan's standard droop, its weight a symbol of her fading power, and feel the nobles' glee, their smiles thin as they plot her fall. The candle flame steadies, the shadow fading, and you remember the whispers from Domrémy, the saints' names, threads weaving a tapestry of doubt. The king shifts, his cloak rustling, and you wonder if he'll stand with her or cast her aside, the monk's prayer a faint thread in the growing dark. You're not just standing, you're holding her fate, the noble's daggers your enemy, her faith your only hope. You feel the tension coil, the noble's voices rising, the king's gaze dropping to his hands, and see Joan's chin lift, her defiance a spark in the torchlight. You notice the noble woman's fingers tighten on a linen cap, her eyes cold, and sense the betrayal solidifying, a storm you can't outrun. The monk's prayer falters, the rushed torch sputters, and you recall the raven's cry, the embers fall, echoes of a destiny closing in. You want to draw your sword, to protect her, but the hall's weight holds you, the candle's steady flame a mocking witness. You stand with her, the nobles plot your crucible, her vision your shield against the gathering dark. Your wrists ache as you face the judge's shadowed accusations, the damp air of Rouen dungeon pressing against your skin, the trial's torment a slow grind that strips your soul bare. It's February 1431, and you're chained beside Joan, her armor gone, her wimple torn, her face gaunt under the flickering light of rushed torches that cast long, twisted shadows on the stone walls. The scent of mold and unwashed bodies fills your lungs, a bitter reminder of the months in this cell, while the judges, clad in black robes, circle like vultures, their voices a low drone of condemnation. You feel the cold seep into your bones, the iron shackles biting, and hear the drip of water echoing, a relentless pulse that mirrors your dread. You see Joan, her hands bound, her eyes still burning with that unyielding fire, as she answers their questions, her voices, her visions, each word a defiance that echoes off the damp stone. The judges' faces, hidden beneath hoods, twist with scorn, their quills scratching on parchment with a sound like grinding teeth, and you sense their intent, a trap closing around her. The air carries the faint tang of incense from a clay censer, a mockery of holiness in this pit, and you shift your weight, the chains clanking, your body screaming for release. You notice a guard, his leather apron stained, leaning against the wall, his eyes cold as he watches Joan, a witness to her unraveling courage. An eerie detail catches you, a single rat scurries along the wall, its eyes glinting like tiny coals in the torchlight, pausing to stare at Joan as if judging her fate. Historians still debate whether such creatures were drawn to her cell by chance or symbolized the decay of her trial, but you feel its gaze, a shiver that deepens the dungeon's chill, a harbinger of the pyre. You glance at it, its whiskers twitching, and hear Joan's voice falter, a crack in her resolve that stabs at your heart. You remember the raven at Orleans, the candle's shadow in Chinon, and wonder if this rat weaves the same thread of doom. Key fact: in February 1431, Joan of Arc's trial began in Rouen, where English-backed clerics sought to discredit her as a heretic, a process that would lead to her condemnation. You feel that condemnation now, your shoulders slumping as the judges demand she recant, their voices rising, the chains rattling with your every move. You see a monk, his verdigris robe faded, holding a wooden cross, his lips moving in silent prayer, and sense his helplessness, a mirror to your own. You want to break free, to shield her from their words, but the shackles hold you, the rats stare a weight you can't shake, the dungeons damp a shroud over your hope. You're not just a prisoner, you're a witness to her breaking, the judge's accusations a storm that threatens to drown her spirit. You hear Joan's voice, raw but steady, reciting the saints' names, Michael, Catherine, each a lifeline she clings to, and feel the crew's absence, their faith left on the battlefield, now a memory. You recall the rampart's breach, the noble's betrayal, threads weaving a tapestry of loss, and the rat skitters closer, its presence a silent judge. The monk's cross trembles in his hands, the incense thickens, and you notice a judge's finger tap the parchment, a rhythm of doom that echoes the water's drip. You want to scream, to defy them, but the chains silence you, Joan's gaze your only anchor. You're caught in the trial's rhythm, each question a lash, each silence a wound. You see Joan's hands clench, her nails digging into her palms, and feel the guards' amusement, their breaths shallow in the torchlight, their leather creaking as they shift. The rat pauses, its eyes locked on her, and you remember the forge's ember, the crow's cry, echoes of a destiny closing in. The monk's prayer falters, the judges lean closer, and you wonder if the saints have abandoned her, the dungeon's cold a blade against your faith. You're not just enduring, you're holding her light, the rat your enemy, her voice your shield. You feel the tension coil, the judge's voice is sharpening, the guard's smirk widening, and see Joan's chin lift, her defiance a spark in the shadows. You notice the rat scurry away, its tail brushing the stone, and sense a shift, a moment of hope or despair, the monk's cross a faint glow. The water drips louder, the incense chokes, and you recall the noble's plot, the raven's flight, threads of a fate you can't escape. You want to pray with her, to share her burden, but the chains bind you, the torchlight dims, and you stand with her, the judge's accusations your crucible, her faith your last stand. Your lungs sear as you burn in Rouen's silent horror, the pyres embrace a suffocating heat that claws at your skin, the air thick with the stench of smoke and scorched wood. It's May 30th, 1431, and you're bound beside Joan, her wrists raw from chains, her wimple reduced to ashes as flames lick upward, their orange glow casting a hellish light on the gathered crowd. The marketplace's cobblestones press against your knees, the crowd's murmurs a dull roar, their faces a blur of awe and revulsion as the fire consumes her, the crackle of timber a relentless dirge. You feel the heat blister your face, the smoke choking your throat, and hear her voice, faint, defiant, calling on Jesus, a cry that pierces the silence before it fades. You see Joan, her body trembling, her eyes locked on the sky as if seeking the saints who guided her, the flames curling around her legs, her linen shift blackening under the inferno. The executioner's shadow looms, his leather apron stained with soot, his hands steady as he tends the pyre, and you sense the crowds shift, some weep, others jeer, their emotions a tangled web you can't unravel. The air carries the bitter tang of burning flesh, a scent that clings to your memory, and you taste ash on your lips, a bitter reminder of her sacrifice. You strain against your bonds, the ropes cutting deeper, your heart pounding with a rage you can't release. An eerie detail catches you, a single flame leaps higher, twisting into a shape like a cross before collapsing, as if the fire itself mourns her passing. Historians still debate whether this was a trick of the heat or a divine sign, but you feel its weight, a chill amid the blaze, a whisper of her spirit rising. You glance at the flame, its dance haunting, and hear the crowds gasp, their murmurs rising, a mix of fear and wonder. You remember the rat in the dungeon, the raven at Orleans, and wonder if this cross marks her ascension or a final taunt from her enemies. Key fact: on May 30, 1431, Joan of Arc was burned at the stake in Rouen at 19, her execution a public spectacle that cemented her martyrdom and shifted French resolve against the English. You feel that martyrdom now, your eyes stinging as the flames climb higher, Joan's voice silenced, her body slumping as the fire claims her, the crowd silence a heavy shroud. You see a monk, his verdigris robe singed at the edges, clutching a wooden cross, his face wet with tears, and sense his grief, a mirror to your own. You want to scream, to tear free and save her, but the ropes hold you, the heat a wall you can't breach, the cross-shaped flame a question you can't answer. You're not just a witness, you're a shard of her broken dream, the pyre's heat a furnace that forges her legend. You hear the executioner's grunt, the wood collapsing, and feel the crowd's energy shift, their murmurs growing into a hymn of her name, a defiance born from her ashes. You recall the rampart's breach, the noble's betrayal, threads weaving a tapestry of loss and triumph, and the flame's cross lingers, a symbol you can't escape. The monk's cross trembles, the crowd presses closer, and you notice a noble woman, her wimple pristine, watching from afar, her face unreadable. You want to curse her, to blame her for this end, but the fire's roar drowns you, Joan's spirit your only light. You're caught in the pyre's rhythm, each crackle a heartbeat, each flame a memory. You see Joan's hands, charred yet raised, her final gesture a prayer, and feel the crew's absence, their faith left on the battlefield, now a ghost. The cross-shaped flame fades, the crowd's hymn swells, and you remember the forge's ember, the candle's shadow, echoes of a destiny fulfilled. The monk's tears fall, the executioner steps back, and you wonder if the saints claimed her, the heat a blade against your hope. You're not just burning, you're carrying her sacrifice, the pyre your altar, her voice your eternal guide. You feel the flames subside, the smoke thickening, the crowd silence a tomb, and see Joan's body collapse, the fire's glow dimming to embers. You notice the noble woman turn away, her cloak billowing, and sense the weight of her role, a shadow in this tragedy. The monk's cross lowers, the rat's memory flickers, and you recall the dungeon's damp, the raven's cry, threads of a fate now sealed. You want to weep, to honor her, but the ropes bind you, the embers glow, and you stand with her ashes, the pyre's silence your burden, her martyrdom your legacy. Your chest tightens as you sense France's spirit ignite anew, the air trembling with a quiet fury that ripples through the fields of Orleans, the echoes of Joan's sacrifice a call to arms under a twilight sky. It's 1435, and you're among peasants, their faces hardened by loss, their hands gripping wooden staffs as they gather around a makeshift shrine where her ashes once fell, the scent of damp earth and wildflowers rising from the ground. The lawyer's murmur blends with their hushed prayers, a rhythm that stirs your blood, while the horizon glows with the last saffron streaks of day, a promise of dawn's rebellion. You feel the weight of her memory, a flame that refuses to die, and hear the clatter of distant hooves, a sign that her cause lives on. You see a young woman, her linen cap askew, lighting a rush torch at the shrine, her eyes wet with tears yet fierce with resolve, her voice joining others in a chant of Joan's name. The crowd grows, their patched tunics swaying in the evening breeze, and you sense their unity, a bond forged in her martyrdom, their murmurs a hymn that lifts the air. The torch's flame dances, casting a warm glow on their faces, and you smell the smoke, a bitter echo of the pyre, mingling with the sweet scent of hay. You grip a clay pitcher, its water cool against your palm, and feel the peasant's hope, a fragile thread that strengthens with each prayer. An eerie detail catches you, a single bell tolls faintly from a distant chapel, its sound drifting like a ghost across the fields, as if Joan's spirit rings it herself. Historians still debate whether such sounds were natural echoes or a collective yearning for her return, but you feel its pull, a shiver that deepens the twilight, a call to rise. You glance toward the chapel, its silhouette blurred by fog, and hear the peasants' voices swell, their faith a force you can't deny. You remember the raven at Orleans, the cross-shaped flame, and wonder if this bell heralds her vengeance or her blessing. Key fact: by 1435, Joan of Arc's execution had galvanized French resistance, inspiring a renewed push against the English that eventually led to their expulsion from most of France. You feel that inspiration now, your boots sinking into the soft earth as you join the chant, the shrine stones warm under your touch, the peasant's eyes alight with a fire she kindled. You see a monk, his verdigris robe tattered, raising a wooden cross, his voice hoarse but steady, and sense his conviction, a mirror to your own. You want to lead them, to carry her banner, but the bell's toll holds you, the torchlight a guide through the gathering dark. You're not just a peasant, you're a vessel for her unyielding spirit, the crowd's energy a tide that sweeps you forward. You hear the hooves grow louder, a patrol perhaps, and feel the tension rise, their presence a threat to this fragile hope, their leather creaking in the distance. You recall the dungeon's damp, the noble's betrayal, threads weaving a tapestry of resilience, and the bell's echo lingers, a pulse in the twilight. The monk's cross gleams, the young woman's torch flares, and you notice a nobleman, his indigo cloak hidden in the shadows, watching silently. You want to challenge him, to demand his allegiance, but the crowd's chant drowns you, Joan's name your rallying cry. You're caught in the uprising's rhythm, each prayer a step, each voice a weapon. You see the young woman pass the torch, her hands trembling but sure, and feel the peasant's bond tighten, forged in her sacrifice. The bell tolls again, the fog thickens, and you remember the pyre's heat, the rat's stare, echoes of a destiny reborn. The monk's voice rises, the nobleman shifts, and you wonder if this spirit will falter, the twilight a crucible for their faith. You're not just gathering, you're igniting her legacy, the bell your signal, her memory your shield. You feel the crowd swell, the torchlight spreading, the hooves fading into the night, and see the young woman's face harden, her tears drying into resolve. You notice the nobleman retreat, his cloak vanishing, and sense a shift, a victory born in this silence. The monk's cross lowers, the bell's echo fades, and you recall the rampart's breach, the judge's accusations, threads of a fate now turning. You want to shout her name, to lead this charge, but the twilight holds you, the shrine's warmth your anchor, her spirit your eternal guide. Your shoulders ache as you place a king's burden on, the air thick with the scent of incense and polished wood in Rheims cathedral, the crown's weight a silent command that binds you to Joan's legacy. It's July 17, 1429, and you stand among the throng, your boots scuffing the marble floor, the cathedral's stained glass casting a verdigris glow across the faces of nobles and peasants alike, their breaths held in awe. The organ's deep hum vibrates through your chest, a sacred pulse, while Charles VII kneels before the altar, his russet cloak pooling like royal blood, his hands trembling as the crown is lowered onto his head. You feel the crowd's hope, a fragile thread, and hear Joan's voice, clear, triumphant, echoing from the sidelines, her armor gleaming despite the dust of war. You see her, her wimple pristine under a helm, her standard held high, the lily and cross a beacon that steadies the king's nerves, her eyes fixed on the ceremony with a pride that cuts through the incense haze. The nobles, in indigo robes, shift uneasily, their leather-gloved hands clutching prayer books, and you sense their reluctance, a shadow that lingers behind their forced smiles. The air carries the faint tang of wax from countless candles, their flames flickering in the draught, and you grip a wooden stool for balance, your legs weak from the march that brought you here. You notice a monk, his verdigris robe catching the light, anointing the king with oil from a clay pitcher, his voice a low chant that binds this moment. An eerie detail catches you, a single ray of sunlight pierces the stained glass, striking the crown like a divine hand, then vanishes as if withdrawing its blessing. Historians still debate whether this was a celestial sign or a trick of the light, but you feel its absence, a chill that deepens the cathedral solemnity, a question of what lies ahead. You glance at the spot, the glass now dull, and hear the crowd's murmur rise, their faith teetering on this fragile victory. You remember the raven at Orleans, the Pyre's cross, and wonder if this crown seals her triumph or foreshadows her fall. Key fact: on July 17, 1429, Joan of Arc orchestrated Charles VII's coronation in Reims, a pivotal moment that legitimized his rule and bolstered French morale against the English. You feel that legitimacy now, your chest swelling as the king rises, the crown steady on his head, the organ's hum swelling into a triumphant roar. You see Joan step forward, her armor clanking softly, her voice praising the saints, and sense the nobles' unease, their eyes darting to the monk, who nods solemnly. You want to cheer, to embrace this victory, but the sunlight's vanish holds you, the cathedral's weight a reminder of the war still raging beyond these walls. You're not just a witness, you're a pillar in her triumph, the crown's gleam a reflection of her unyielding will. You hear the peasants' gasps, their patched tunics swaying as they bow, and feel their trust in Joan, a bond that strengthens with each note of the organ. You recall the dungeon's damp, the siege's fury, threads weaving a tapestry of resilience, and the monk's chant lingers, a thread of sanctity. The noble's gloved hands tighten, the king's gaze meets yours, and you notice a noble woman, her wimple framing a cold smile, whispering to an advisor. You want to challenge her, to protect this moment, but the ceremony's rhythm pulls you, Joan's standard your guide. You're caught in the coronation's rhythm, each chant a vow, each step a legacy. You see Charles rise, his cloak billowing, his face set with a resolve borrowed from Joan, and feel the crowd's energy surge, their prayers a shield against doubt. The sunlight's absence haunts you, the nobles shift, and you remember the forge's ember, the bells toll, echoes of a destiny unfolding. The monk lowers the pitcher, the organ fades, and you wonder if this crown will hold, the cathedral a crucible for her vision. You're not just crowning, you're carrying her burden, the stained glass your witness, her faith your crown. You feel the ceremony end, the crowd's murmur softening, the king stepping forward, and see Joan's helm tilt, her pride a quiet fire. You notice the noblewoman's smile fade, her whisper silenced, and sense a shift, a victory tempered by shadows. The monk's robe rustles, the nobles bow, and you recall the rampart's breach, the judge's accusations, threads of a fate now crowned. You want to stand with her, to guard this moment, but the cathedral's silence holds you, the crown's weight your anchor, her legacy your eternal charge. Your hands tremble as you carry Joan's unyielding fire forward, the air sharp with the scent of pine and smoke on the battle-scarred plains of Normandy, her legacy a torch that guides you through a twilight fog. It's 1436, and you're among a ragged band of soldiers, their tunics torn, their leather aprons blackened by soot, as you march toward Compiègne, the ground soft under your boots, the distant clash of steel a faint promise of redemption. The sky glows with the last ochre streaks of day, a canvas painted by war, while the wind carries the cries of the wounded, a haunting melody that stirs your blood. You feel the weight of her name, a flame that burns in your chest, and hear the creak of a wooden cart carrying supplies, its wheels grinding against the earth. You see a young soldier, his linen cap stained with mud, clutching a rush torch, his face set with a resolve that mirrors Joan's, his voice joining yours in a quiet chant of her deeds. The band moves as one, their breath steaming in the cooling air, and you sense their unity, a bond forged in her martyrdom, their footsteps a rhythm that echoes her march. The torch's flame flickers, casting a warm glow on their weary faces, and you smell the pine needles crushed underfoot, a bitter contrast to the smoke of past pyres. You grip a clay pitcher, its water sloshing as you pass it along, and feel the crew's hope, a fragile thread that strengthens with each step toward the fight. An eerie detail catches you, a single owl hoots from a gnarled oak, its eyes glowing like embers in the fog, watching your progress with an otherworldly stillness. Historians still debate whether such creatures were omens of victory or silent mourners for Joan's fate, but you feel its gaze, a shiver that deepens the twilight, a question of what lies ahead. You glance at the owl, its silhouette stark against the fading light, and hear the soldiers' chant grow louder, their faith a force you can't deny. You remember the raven at Orleans, the cross-shaped flame, and wonder if this owl heralds her spirit or a new trial. Key fact: after Joan's death in 1431, her legacy inspired continued French resistance, culminating in the liberation of Compiègne in 1436, a step toward driving the English from France. You feel that resistance now, your legs burning as you climb a gentle rise, the cart's creak a steady beat, the soldier's torch held high like her standard. You see a monk, his verdigris robe patched, leading a prayer, his wooden cross swaying with each step, and sense his conviction, a mirror to your own. You want to lead them, to wield her fire, but the owl's hoot holds you, the torchlight a guide through the thickening fog. You're not just a soldier, you're a bearer of her unquenchable spirit, the band's energy a tide that sweeps you toward victory. You hear the distant steel clash louder, a patrol perhaps, and feel the tension rise, their presence a threat to this fragile hope, their leather creaking in the wind. You recall the dungeon's damp, the pyre's heat, threads weaving a tapestry of endurance, and the owl's hoot lingers, a pulse in the twilight. The monk's cross gleams, the young soldier's torch flares, and you notice a nobleman, his indigo cloak hidden in the shadows, watching silently. You want to challenge him, to demand his aid, but the band's chant drowns you, Joan's name your rallying cry. You're caught in the march's rhythm, each step a vow, each breath a legacy. You see the soldier pass the torch, his hands steady despite the mud, and feel the band's bond tighten, forged in her sacrifice. The owl hoots again, the fog deepens, and you remember the bell's toll, the stained glasses vanish, echoes of a destiny reborn. The monk's voice rises, the nobleman shifts, and you wonder if this fire will falter, the twilight a crucible for their faith. You're not just advancing, you're kindling her legacy, the owl your witness, her memory your shield. You feel the band swell, the torchlight spreading, the steel clash nearing, and see the soldier's face harden, his chant a defiant hymn. You notice the nobleman retreat, his cloak vanishing, and sense a shift, a victory born in this march. The monk's cross lowers, the owl's hoot fades, and you recall the rampart's breach, the judge's accusations, threads of a fate now turning. You want to shout her name, to lead this charge, but the twilight holds you, the pines scent your anchor, her spirit your eternal guide. Your breath catches as you stand where her voice lingers, the air heavy with the silence of Rouen marketplace, the echoes of Joan's final cry fading into a stillness that haunts the cobblestones under your feet. It's 1456, and you're alone now, the crowd long gone, the sky a somber gray at dusk, the scent of rain and ash lingering from a pyre that burned 25 years ago. The marketplace feels vast, its edges blurred by twilight fog, the stones worn smooth by time, and you hear the faint drip of water from a nearby well, a rhythm that mirrors the pulse of her memory. You feel the weight of her absence, a void that presses against your chest, and see the spot where she stood, marked only by a faint scorch, a scar on the earth. You step closer, your boots scuffing the stone, and imagine her voice, raw, defiant, rising above the flames, her hands raised in prayer as the fire claimed her, the crowd's silence a tomb that sealed her fate. The fog thickens, wrapping the marketplace in a shroud, and you sense her spirit, a whisper in the wind, her presence lingering in the air like a saint's breath. The well's drip grows louder, a steady beat, and you smell the damp earth, a contrast to the smoke that once choked this place, your hands trembling as you touch the scorched stone. You notice a monk, his verdigris robe faded, kneeling nearby, his wooden cross pressed to his lips, his tears falling silently into the dust. An eerie detail catches you, a single petal, fallen from a wild rose, rests on the scorch mark, its crimson hue stark against the gray, as if placed by an unseen hand. Historians still debate whether such tokens were left by mourners or grew from her ashes, but you feel its softness, a warmth amid the cold, a sign of her enduring grace. You glance at the petal, its fragility a contrast to the pyre's fury, and hear the monk's muffled sob, a sound that breaks the silence. You remember the owl in Normandy, the raven at Orleans, and wonder if this rose marks her peace or a call to remember. Key fact: in 1456, Joan of Arc was posthumously declared innocent by a papal inquiry, her rehabilitation affirming her role as a national heroine and shaping France's identity for centuries. You feel that affirmation now, your knees weakening as you kneel beside the monk, the scorch mark warm under your palm, the marketplace a cathedral of her memory. You see the fog part slightly, revealing the well's silhouette, and sense the weight of her legacy, a burden and a gift you carry forward. You want to speak, to honor her, but the silence holds you, the petal's presence a question you can't answer, the monk's tears your companion. You're not just a mourner, you're a keeper of her eternal flame, the marketplace's stillness a testament to her sacrifice. You hear the wind sigh, carrying the faintest echo of her chant, and feel the crew's absence, their faith left on battlefields, now a whisper in your soul. You recall the coronation's crown, the siege's fury, threads weaving a tapestry of triumph and loss, and the petal glows softly, a beacon in the dusk. The monk's cross lowers, the well's drip slows, and you notice a noble woman's shadow, her wimple faint in the fog, watching from afar. You want to confront her, to demand justice, but the twilight deepens, her presence a ghost you can't grasp. You're caught in the silence's rhythm, each breath a memory, each step a tribute. You see the monk rise, his robe brushing the stone, and feel the marketplace's weight lift, her spirit a presence that lingers beyond the fog. The petal trembles, the wind fades, and you remember the dungeon's chains, the pyre's heat, echoes of a destiny fulfilled. The noblewoman's shadow vanishes, the monk's sob quiets, and you wonder if the saints still hear her, the dusk a crucible for her legacy. You're not just standing, you're holding her silence, the rose your witness, her voice your eternal guide. The fog thickens slowly, the marketplace fading into a grey embrace, the scorch mark a faint glow under your hand, the monk's figure a shadow blending with the dusk. You feel the weight of her name settle, a burden that warms and haunts, the wells drip a final heartbeat as the night claims the air. The petal curls inward, the noblewoman's ghost dissolves, and you recall the bell's toll, the owl's hoot, threads of a fate now resting. You kneel in the silence, the monk's cross a faint gleam, the marketplace a shrine where her voice lingers, her story a flame that burns beyond the ashes, leaving you haunted, her legend your eternal charge.